So we are restarting the public meeting of the City Planning Commission. At the outset, I would note that Commissioner Cantor was not here for the initial votes, but wants to be noted as voting aye on all of the matters. And with that, Madam Secretary.
Good afternoon. This is the public hearing for the East Harlem neighborhood rezoning, Borough of Manhattan, calendar numbers 34 through 37. CD 11, number 34, C170358, ZMM, number 35, N170359, ZRM, number 36, N170359A, ZRM, number 37, C170360HUM. Public hearing in the matter of applications for zoning map, zoning text, and urban renewal plan amendments concerning the East Harlem neighborhood rezoning. Notice, a public hearing is being held by the City Planning Commission in conjunction with the above ULURP hearings to receive comments related to a draft environmental impact statement. This hearing is being held pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act and the City Environmental Quality Review. Also, as a reminder, speakers will be limited to 3 minutes with questions from the Commission following.
I would also note that we will follow an order of 5 speakers in favor, 5 speakers opposed. And what I will do is I will call out the next batch of 5 speakers. And so that way, if your number is called, it's in the upper right-hand corner of the speaker's registration card. You can begin to line up behind the speaker's podium, and that will allow us to hear more quickly and more efficiently from the large number of speakers who would like to be heard on this item. And with that, before calling the first speakers, we will ask our interpreter to translate the opening comments.
Good afternoon. This is for the non-English speakers. Tenemos servicios de interpretación del inglés al español disponibles. Si hay alguien aquí que necesita interpretación del inglés al español, acérquese a la mesa allá atrás, al señor que tiene la mano hacia arriba. Por favor, tenemos simultáneamente con audífonos interpretación. Gracias. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias. Okay, we will now be hearing in order from speakers numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we will start with Commissioner Maria Torres Springer.
Good afternoon, Chair Lago, Vice Chair Knuckles, and members of the City Planning Commission. My name is Maria Torres Springer. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Housing Preservation and Development. I'm here today in support of the city's proposed East Harlem initiative. As you are all well aware, the city's population continues to grow very rapidly. One of East Harlem's greatest assets is that about 3/4 of its housing stock is regulated affordable housing. But as East Harlem families grow and more people from neighboring boroughs and across the nation and globe look for affordable, diverse, transit-rich places to call home, the demand for housing continues to place enormous pressure on the area's housing stock. Between 2002 and 2014, the median rent in East Harlem increased by approximately 40%, compared to only 24% across New York City as a whole. New market rate development is occurring in East Harlem without any requirements for affordable housing, while more than half of all households are rent burdened. The rezoning proposal before you today is crucial in addressing the high demand for housing by enabling growth on appropriate corridors in the neighborhood while requiring permanently affordable apartments in all new developments in upzoned areas. Accompanying this rezoning is HPD's draft East Harlem housing plan, which memorializes a set of strategies and commitments to address the neighborhood's unique housing needs as identified by the community. This housing plan for East Harlem would not have been possible without the extraordinary level of engagement and commitment demonstrated by the community in the creation of the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. The recommendations that emerged out of that process, which were vetted and discussed in dozens of meetings between HPD, the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan Steering Committee, and local organizations, really formed the foundation for the strategies in the draft plan before you today, and which we continue to refine. This plan includes new approaches by our agency and represents by far the most robust set of neighborhood housing strategies that we believe the city has seen in recent years. Just to provide some examples of some new initiatives. First, from sending mailers, making calls, organizing events, we are conducting more proactive and strategic outreach to property owners than ever before. Over the past year, we reached out to more than 2,600 individual properties. To help build on that initial contact with property owners this summer, we launched a Landlord Ambassadors pilot program to provide technical assistance for small property owners who are interested in, but unfamiliar with, the process of securing a loan and other assistance from HPD to rehabilitate their buildings and, of course, preserve affordability. Next, last summer, we began conducting block sweeps in East Harlem, where we proactively surveyed distressed properties using data and community referrals, and at the same time walked entire blocks to ensure proper upkeep. To date, we have proactively surveyed 426 buildings in East Harlem. Approximately 20 have been referred for additional action, and that work continues. We're currently involved in 82 housing court cases on litigation in East Harlem to both compel landlords to repair all open violations on the building and to seek civil penalties where appropriate. Next, to support tenants, our sister agency, HRA, extended free legal services and universal access to counsel for those facing housing court or eviction, including $4.6 million in funding committed annually through FY 2021 for East Harlem alone. And the tenant support unit of the city is going door to door, advising tenants of their rights, reporting instances of harassment and poor building quality, and generally connecting tenants to free legal help where needed. Next, this past January, we began convening an East Harlem Preservation Stakeholders Group, bringing together tenant organizers, legal services, local developers, to better share information and more closely coordinate on preservation efforts in the neighborhood. We've also committed to expediting the construction of 2,400 new affordable homes on public sites, including committing to 20% of units to be affordable for those earning less than $25,770 for a family of three at 3 of those sites. Meanwhile, we are rigorously exploring the feasibility of additional public sites that neighborhood stakeholders have identified as appropriate for housing. Next, last fall, we issued new marketing guidelines and began training local service providers to serve as housing ambassadors to support those looking for affordable housing. We have also launched a new MWBE build-up program, which for the first time requires developers to spend at least a quarter of all HPD-supported costs on certified MWBEs. To support East Harlem's retail corridors, we are also encouraging developers to use our retail design guidelines to enable flexible commercial space, to refer to the commercial district needs assessment to better meet local retail service gaps, and connect with the Neighborhood 360 grantee, Union Settlement Association, to help identify potential tenants for new commercial spaces. And you'll all hear further details on these small business initiatives from my colleague, Commissioner Greg Bishop, later on today. As I mentioned earlier, the housing plan is only a draft, meaning that it's a work in progress, and I welcome any feedback or ideas for improvement. Since we issued the draft plan in May, we've also made the following commitments and reached the following milestones. For instance, in partnership with Enterprise, we allocated $500,000 to the East Harlem El Barrio Community Land Trust to acquire and rehab properties, including potentially 3 city-owned properties for affordable housing. We are exploring the possibility of including East Harlem in a Certificate of No Harassment pilot program. We revised the term sheets of our major financing programs and allocated $1.9 billion in additional capital to reach deeper affordability levels and also to require homes for formerly homeless families. We are instituting reforms in our RFP process to streamline that process and to make it easier for community-based developers to compete for publicly owned land. We continue to host tenant and property owner events in the neighborhood. Our last East Harlem event in June attracted more than 100 property owners who received help in dealing with their water bills, tax liens, foreclosure prevention, other issues. We have also trained 2 additional organizations, Hope Community and East Harlem Council for Community Improvement, to serve as housing ambassadors to help residents access more affordable housing. Lastly, we're continuing to work with the Speaker's Office and the Steering Committee to enhance coordination around all of our preservation efforts in the area. Now, later today, you will hear details on many of these initiatives from my colleagues. Our team at HPD continues to listen actively to community feedback, and we look forward to refining the housing plan throughout the ULURP process. You'll hear from members of the team who span really all of the divisions at HPD, because we understand that in order to meet the needs and aspirations of residents in East Harlem and to ensure that this housing plan is as comprehensive and as effective as it can be, that we have to use every tool that exists, and in some instances even create new ones, to make sure that it's a plan that members of the community can be proud of, and that one that we can all embrace and embark on together. While you'll also hear later a full presentation from the team on this project, I'd also like to say a few words in support of the Sendero Verde project. As an initial step in our commitment to construct new affordable homes in East Harlem, HPD has designated the East 111th Street RFP site to the Sendero Verde project through our RFP process, which was heavily informed by community goals and priorities as outlined in the Community Visioning Report, the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, and our work with the Parks Department profiling the needs of the 4 gardens to be relocated in the new development. This approximately 650-unit passive house standard 100% affordable project balances a number of the community's stated goals for the site. 20% of the apartments are set aside for households earning up to $25,770 for a family of 3. That's 30% of AMI. The project's partners include Acacia Network, El Barrio Operation Fightback, Dream Charter School, the YMCA, Mount Sinai, and Union Settlement. And services will include a grocery store, public open space, new amenities for the 4 community gardens currently operating on the site. We look forward to continuing collaborations such as these with neighborhood residents and stakeholders to deliver community-informed development on public land. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the East Harlem rezoning, your indulgence in going over the time limit, and opportunity to speak in support of Sendero Verde. And at this point, I'm happy to take any questions that the Commission might have.
And what I will note is, Commissioner, you did not go over the time limit. We have 2 exceptions to the 3-minute time limit. Elected officials may speak at any length when they choose to come, and we anticipate that we will be hearing from elected officials. And commissioners, though not members of their team, we welcome to speak for 10 minutes. Other members of your team, however, will be limited, as are all others, to 3 minutes. Given the size of the crowd, I am going to be quite strict about it because, again, we want to hear from everyone. And with that, questions for Commissioner Torres Springer. Commissioner De La Hoz.
Commissioner Torres Springer, thank you for being here. I appreciate you outlining the number of things that HPD has put in place and is thinking about putting in place. And I know that the administration has made a really significant commitment with the additional $1.9 billion to deepen affordability levels. That's certainly a very significant thing on top of a very ambitious municipal affordable housing plan. I think I'm sure we'll be hearing later from the community that some of the most significant concerns really have to do with fears of displacement, concern that there's not enough emphasis in the plan about preservation of existing affordable housing, and that the timing of the Housing New York plan, which your department is putting together, is still in draft form. Meanwhile, this process is moving forward first. I'm wondering if you could talk about try to address some of the concerns about the timing between this proposal for the rezoning versus additional protections that the community is seeking, in particular, the certificate of no harassment.
Thank you for your questions, Commissioner. We share many of the concerns and sentiments that the community residents have voiced about the need to make sure that we are as aggressive as we need to be in terms of preservation. It is, in fact, a real cornerstone of our plan. And what their number one goal in this housing plan is to ensure that we are protecting residents who are vulnerable to displacement. It is why, in my opinion, we have not just outlined strategies to defend against these risks, but we are in fact, and I think this is unprecedented in how this administration has been addressing these issues, the work in that will not start only when the rezoning has been approved. A lot of what I mentioned earlier, the proactive outreach to landlords, the block sweeps, the door knocking to speak with residents to make sure they're informed of those rights, that work has already started and will continue in this process. And so it's a fundamental difference in approach that we have taken in this administration, one that we are extraordinarily committed to and have been since the start of the process. Preservation in general, we know that over the course of the last few years, we financed more than 3,000 units on the preservation side in the neighborhood. We know that that work, given the housing stock, has to continue, and we need to use different tools. We can't just hope that landlords, especially of smaller buildings, are going to know about us and use our programs. So the novel approaches, and ones that we will continue to build on working with partners, say through the Landlord Ambassadors program, is to really ensure that that outreach is as one-on-one, proactive, customized as possible in order to get more of the landowners into our program so that the capital repairs can happen, but of course affordability can be assured. In terms of the timing, which I know has been a question, the needs in the neighborhood are quite stark. We know that market rate development is already happening without a lot of affordability requirements. And so the ability to move forward with the rezoning proposal, including the mapping of mandatory inclusionary housing, ensures that as development happens moving forward, that there will be permanently affordable units. And that's why we believe there is such urgency to moving forward with this rezoning. There are aspects, especially on the programmatic side, that have started and will continue. We will build on those. But the spirit is to be able to use all of the tools in unison. And the approval of this housing plan and the rezoning is, of course, it's extremely significant tool in ensuring that we can not just protect residents into the future, but we can also address the needs of a growing population of our city.
Yes, Commissioner Efron.
Thank you, Commissioner Torres, and we thank your department for being so transparent about some of the new programs that you're developing. As our housing commissioner, I wonder if you can perhaps provide in another form, written or otherwise, any information you have about the investment the city will be making in NYCHA repairs. And when we look at the zoning, rezoning of East Harlem, one consideration is kind of the spine of the entire neighborhood, which is public housing and NYCHA. We know that there's a large capital need. So anything the administration through your office or NYCHA directly could provide about the commitment there would certainly help us understand better the total continuum of affordable housing in the neighborhood.
Understood, and that is in every neighborhood in which we work, of course, as closely as possible with our colleagues at NYCHA to make sure that the investments and the strategies are ones that are coordinated. And I should also mention that as part of the new approach of this administration through the Neighborhood Development Fund, and this is not necessarily specific to NYCHA, but I think speaks generally about the recognition of this administration that as we look at zoning issues and we approve rezonings, that part of ensuring that we are strengthening the bones of communities is to really identify and then fund the underlying infrastructure needs of a neighborhood, be they parks, community facilities, sewer upgrades, schools, etc. And so I know that this has already been a very significant part of the East Harlem planning process, and that will continue to be the case because we have to make sure that as we add capacity for residential growth, that we are also making the types of investments in infrastructure that truly strengthen neighborhoods into the future.
Thank you.
Commissioner De La Hoz.
If I might, just kind of following up on the timing issue, and, you know, one of the things that the community board has asked for instance, you know, is following up or perhaps mapping here a special district such as that exists in Chelsea because of the timing of when the citywide legislation or the citywide pilot for the certificate of no harassment will go in place, and wanting to have those protections now as part of a rezoning rather than not having a clear timing for when the pilot might come in place or when citywide legislation may go into effect. I'm just wondering if you think it would be appropriate to delay the implementation of the timing of the rezoning until the certificate of no harassment citywide legislation were in place.
So just to clarify the process for the pilot program for the certificate of no harassment, we have been working very actively with a number of stakeholders and the City Council on a pilot program that we hope will be targeted and effective and will really help deter property owners who have harassed tenants. That has been a process that we've undertaken over the course of the last year. It is moving ahead at, I think, a very positive pace. However, as effective as that is going to be and as meaningful as I think that's going to be, I view that as complementary to the tools that we already have and will continue to use to prevent harassment and displacement. And so I mentioned earlier whether it's the free legal representation for all tenants facing harassment or eviction, the tenant support unit that's going door to door, the tenant harassment prevention task force that every day looks to ensure that all of the regulatory agencies, city and state, are working in a coordinated fashion to identify bad actor landlords and pursue those investigations. So those are all tools that are part, will be complementary to the Certificate of No Harassment pilot program, and therefore, given the need that I mentioned earlier, to ensure that we have the types of protections in place, like MIH, and given the needs in the neighborhood, I do believe that this rezoning proposal should move forward as planned, and that as we continue to aggressively get to finality on CONH and implement that it will complement the other tools, but it's certainly not the only thing that exists in order to achieve the shared goals of ensuring that harassment does not take place in this neighborhood.
Thank you.
Other questions for the Commissioner? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, again, is the Commissioner, and so we'll be allowed 10 minutes. Commissioner Greg Bishop of Small Business Services.
Sorry, just have to readjust a little bit. All right, good afternoon, Chair Largo and members of the City Planning Commission. My name is Greg Bishop, and I'm the Commissioner of the New York City Department of Small Business Services. At SBS, we aim to unlock economic potential and create economic security for all New Yorkers by connecting New Yorkers to quality jobs, building stronger businesses, and fostering vibrant neighborhoods across the 5 boroughs. Today, I'd like to provide the Commission with details on the ongoing work of SBS that is currently underway in East Harlem with the help of our community partners. Following my testimony, I will have members of my staff available to answer additional questions you may have. Throughout the community engagement process, SBS has played an active role to ensure the needs of small businesses, commercial corridors, and job seekers were incorporated into the planning process. We participated in all of the community vision workshops, small business and economic development subgroup meetings, and public open house sessions led by Speaker Mark Viverito with community stakeholders for the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, and provided input on the plan's economic development recommendations. SBS is also a member of the East Harlem Community Alliance, a diverse group of neighborhood stakeholders led by Union Settlement Association. We have continued to engage the East Harlem Community Alliance and its members through the various initiatives and commitments we've implemented in this neighborhood in direct response to the recommendations from the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. In addition, SBS has worked closely with East Harlem community-based organizations, merchants, and residents over the past 2 years to implement new investments that respond directly to the community's objective of protecting and enhancing the viability of East Harlem's small businesses and increasing economic activity overall. Chief among the new investments is Neighborhood 360, a new program created to identify, develop, and launch commercial revitalization projects in partnership with local stakeholders. Through Neighborhood 360, SBS provided funding and technical assistance to Union Settlement, New East Harlem Merchants Association, and Hope Community, Inc. to conduct a commercial district needs assessment to highlight the existing business landscape of East Harlem shopping corridors with community-identified strengths, challenges, and opportunities for commercial revitalization. Results from the East Harlem CNA directly guided the East Harlem funding priorities for the new Neighborhood 360 grant, which included recommendations from the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, such as direct business services, district marketing, and merchant organizing. Starting in early 2017, SBS is investing nearly $1.5 million in East Harlem over the next 3 years. This Neighborhood 360 grant funding will allow Union Settlement with their partners, Hope Community and NHEMA, to staff, plan, and execute customized commercial revitalization projects to make East Harlem shopping corridors a better place to shop, work, live, and do business. Another objective we've heard from the community was to increase quality employment opportunities and enhance the skills of East Harlem residents. To address this, SBS will ensure better access to our Workforce One services in East Harlem. SBS operates a network of 20 Workforce One career centers that utilize a proven and successful demand-driven model to help businesses meet hiring and training needs and provide job seekers with recruitment expertise and skill-building workshops. The centers leverage a deep understanding of employer needs and sector experience to recruit qualified New York City job seekers to employment opportunities. For those residents who may not have the skills an employer is looking for, we work with the employer to develop trainings that bridge the skills gap. This ensures that residents from neighborhoods such as East Harlem are connected to available employment. Additionally, Workforce One centers build and leverage community partnership networks with a range of organizations to deliver integrated services with the goal of connecting New Yorkers to employment. We will continue working locally to expand our community partner network toward providing high-quality services to the residents of East Harlem through partners such as East Harlem Talent Network and the East Harlem Community Alliance. The city also leverages SBS network of Workforce One career centers to implement Hire NYC, a policy that requires city contractors to consider New Yorkers for employment opportunities created through eligible city contracts. SBS Workforce One Center posts these positions and help connect New Yorkers to open positions created through the city's purchases and investments. SBS is committed to serving the residents of East Harlem and will continue to provide necessary services for the community's business owners and job seekers. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions the Commission may have at this time. As I mentioned, if there are additional questions, my staff will follow up after me.
Questions from the Commission? Commissioner De La Hoz.
Hi, Commissioner Bishop. Thank you for being here. And thanks for sharing information about the Neighborhood 360. You know, a big part of the recommendation from Community Board 11 was about adequate funding for workforce development and training programs, which I would also assume includes adult education and literacy. I'm just wondering if you could speak, bridge programs, specific contextual training programs. Could you speak to either your department or the administration's specific intentions or discussions related to additional investments in the community?
So thank you for that question. Certainly, when we look at our industry partnerships, we have a number of them focused on some of the industries that are fast-growing in New York City, including healthcare, technology, food and beverage services, construction, industrial manufacturing. We are focused on ensuring that we make that connection in terms of understanding the skill sets that those industries are looking for, and working not only with our own training programs, but our community organizations that have similar workforce programs, and also our academic institutions, which includes colleges and universities, and also the Department of Education, to ensure that the curriculum that they have, they're producing a workforce that actually matches the skill sets that the industries are looking for. So certainly we have launched a couple programs that are what we consider pilots, and they've been very successful. And we intend to work closely with the community organizations that have robust programs in East Harlem to not only share that information, but also serve as a pipeline for the training programs that we'll be creating.
So hopefully that sharing of information will also result in additional funding so that more people in the neighborhood can access those programs.
So if the question is directly funding for those particular organizations on the workforce side, we may have to get back to you on that. Certainly what we did with Neighborhood 360 was look at the issues that on the business side, and we were able to actually provide funding for that. But I think there is an opportunity to actually do more on the workforce side. So.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Commissioner Bishop.
Thank you. Great.
Our next speaker, and again, going forward with the exception of elected officials, this will be for 3 minutes, is Kevin Cummings. Oh, okay, he cedes his time. Our next speaker is Luis Sanchez.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Luis Sanchez. I serve as the Manhattan Borough Commissioner for the Department of Transportation. DOT supports this proposed action because East Harlem possesses a foundation for growth. It has been a site of investment and will see further growth and benefits as a result of the current effort. DOT's mission is to provide for the safe, efficient, and environmentally responsible movement of people and goods in the city of New York. We maintain and enhance the transportation infrastructure crucial to the economic vitality and quality of our residents. East Harlem is a portion of the city Manhattan street system that possesses all the positive qualities that make New York City great. East Harlem spot in the original 1811 Manhattan grid gives it wide avenues and largely uninterrupted cross streets. Defined at its core by 4 major avenues and the shopping districts of 125th and 116th, DOT sees East Harlem's geography as an asset. Although it may be overlooked by some, right-angle 90-degree intersections are a great element of safe street design. Square blocks make for safer corners and intersections that provide maximum visibility to walkers, pedestrians, bicyclists, and drivers alike. The neighborhood is also well connected to the rest of the city and the borough by the subway system and the 3 bridges, 2 of which are owned by DOT, that carry bicyclists, cars, and pedestrians. Together, this means East Harlem is easily accessible as a good place to live, work, and visit. All work that DOT does is driven by our citywide design guidelines, which aim to make the city's safe streets smart, green, and accessible to all users. In recent projects, we've improved lighting under the stone arches of the Park Avenue Viaduct. We've made safety improvements for pedestrians by creating refuge areas for people walking under the Metro North rail line. Drivers have more opportunity to see those crossing. Traffic movements are calm and are made more predictable by the expanded curved lanes. In recent years, we have partnered with the MTA to implement select bus service on the 125th Street, 1st Avenue, and 2nd Avenue corridors. These projects brought amenities to the neighborhood, such as bus shelters and wayfinding signage, and improvements to signage and signals to ease congestion and improve safety. DOT also recognizes the role that freight plays in a thriving community. We are currently working on a citywide freight study that evaluates how freight moves through the city. This work will inform our understanding and future improvements in the East Harlem project area. In addition to our regular community coordination and communication with the Speaker, the Borough President, and all of the representatives of this area, my office has been working with the steering committee and several working groups for more than a year in an effort to make this rezoning a success. Given the area's strength in the realm of transportation, the investments that we've already made and will be making, we will be working closely with the Department of City Planning to develop a broad, comprehensive plan for the neighborhood that builds on the strengths of the plan that have emerged for this community-led effort. I believe the East Harlem rezoning will be a success, and again, DOT supports it. Thank you, and I can take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Sanchez? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker in support is Nick Molinari.
Good afternoon, Chair Lago and members of the City Planning Commission. I'm Nick Molinari, and I'm Chief of Planning and Neighborhood Development at the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation. I'm here to speak on the rezoning of East Harlem. New York City Parks recognize the importance of our parks and open spaces in improving the quality of life for residents in East Harlem and in supporting the goals for mixed income and affordable housing advanced by Mayor de Blasio's housing plan. New York City Parks has been working with our partner sister agencies and with local stakeholders to better understand this community's open space priorities and opportunities. We participated in the speaker's community engagement process through the Open Space Subcommittee, which led to the production of the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan in February of 2016. The Neighborhood Plan recognizes the importance of significant park assets in the neighborhood, but also acknowledges a need for improved connections to the Harlem River and Randall's Island, the unmet potential of the waterfront to become a world-class destination for local residents and the city at large, and the vulnerability of East Harlem to climate change and extreme weather events. Acknowledging the great opportunity of East Harlem's waterfront, New York City Parks has begun work on a conceptual design of a planned new 11-acre expansion of Harlem River Park between 125th and 132nd Streets. We held our first public meeting to hear the community's priorities for this important waterfront opportunity on July 12th. We're now working with our consultants to develop design alternatives for this site. We'll be meeting with the public again at our second community meeting on September 19th, and we'll produce a final plan by the end of this year. Recognizing the issues of coastal flooding and drainage facing this community, we're also working closely with the Mayor's Office of Recovery and Resiliency to carry out a coastal and social resiliency study of East Harlem. Work on that will begin in the winter of this year. We'll continue to work closely with our sister agencies, local residents, and park advocates to identify opportunities to mitigate open space impacts and to improve upon existing open spaces in this community. I thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today.
Thank you, Mr. Molinari. Questions from the Commission? Thank you.
Thanks.
We will now turn to speakers in opposition, and we will be hearing from speakers numbers 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, beginning with Diane Collier.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners, and of course, ladies and gentlemen. We all know where the Community Board stands on this. We submitted our recommendations. It is obviously that I'm on the no side today. But I'd like to start first by recognizing my board and commending them and staff for their perseverance on July 20th and July 27th when we took the vote. You see, We've been there from the beginning. We've been there with the 2013 Park Avenue corridor rezoning. We participated in the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. We've had late night presentations and, believe me, 5-hour discussions about this project for the past 2.5 years. And the night of the critical vote, I was never more proud of them than I was then, that they endured the intense adversity, but yet they maintained composure, just like civil rights pioneers of the past, to make sure that our voice was going to be heard, that our vote was going to be taken, and that we submit our recommendations based on everything that we had learned and participated in. Right now, the residents in our communities are being erected in our neighborhood with no input from the community and no chance of living in them. Storefronts are closing, and if they're not closing, they're vacant. Our young adults and our future of East Harlem is in despair, facing limited career opportunities and housing opportunities to stay even if they have a job in the community that they love. And so here we are after the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, a plan we feel is a once-in-a-generation community document that can guide the city and guide the community in the needs of our community, including policy changes, sustainability as we, East Harlem, evolve in the future. It's very clear that when the Department of City Planning presented their East Harlem framework, that it was a bold plan, and I underscore bold. It certainly didn't play it safe, especially when it came to the heights. But clearly, they had the goal of stimulating much-needed economic growth. They had the goal of contributing significantly to the city's affordable housing goals. And it would be a fine plan if there was a clean slate. But East Harlem is not. There are families, there are buildings, and there's heritage there. So we recognize that the proposal is in context with the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan in some degree, but some degree is not good enough, especially when the community, especially when you hear the community expressing pain and fear of being displaced from their home. Let me assure you, community, CB11 heard you, CB11 hears you, and we did vote no. But clearly, we also, after all the work we did, after all the time we took, we wanted to make sure that the commission heard exactly what CB11 wanted for their community. And in conclusion, if the city wants a new plan to truly create East Harlem for the better, then I strongly encourage city planning and the council to include our conditions in your decision to speak to the community's culture and context preservation concerns.
Thank you so much, Ms. Collier. Questions? Yes, Vice Chair Knuckles.
Yes,
Thank you, Chair Collier. Could you give us briefly, in order of priority, what the concerns of the community board are?
Well, that was part of my speech, but I couldn't get to it because I only had 3 minutes. Okay. Less density, deeper affordability. You heard me say preservation. Strengthen those preservation programs that you're presenting to us. Clearly, capital investments, and I think we documented that in our document, regardless of the height constrictions. Extend the boundaries, and I know we included that as part of it. Open spaces in perpetuity, and clearly economic development. Local jobs, local hiring, workforce development, apprenticeship programs. I can go on and on as it relates to that. And certainly continued community engagement, because without the community engagement, you will not develop the East Harlem vision as we saw it. It will become, and we will become just a memory.
Thank you.
Other questions for Chair Collier? Yes, Commissioner Levin.
Yes, Anna.
Ms. Collier, first off, I'd commend the community board under your leadership for the really fine quality submission you made to us. You gave us good context and background and a clear, if lengthy, explanation of what's on your mind, and I know that all of us will take a close look at it. You make it vividly clear up front that one of the largest departures between the neighborhood plan and the Department of City Planning's plan has to do with density.
Yes.
In the meantime, revised text has been released, which would limit the heights of some of the new buildings in the high-density, the neighborhood, the stretches, particularly of 3rd Avenue with the highest density.
Right.
Does that make it any better for you? What's your reaction to the height limits that have been proposed in the A text?
No, because once again, the height limits are in accordance to, of course, zoning, but clearly we need to hear more from the city in terms of the programming that they're going to offer. I've heard a little bit today about the HPD, and I've heard about SP, but they're the same programs that we already have. Be bold in the programming, just as you're bold in the zoning. So that is what I would look for more than anything.
More than the height limits?
Well, the height limit, that's an issue because people in East Harlem are not accustomed to 35-story buildings. They're just not accustomed to it. Just not accustomed. See? They're not accustomed to it. But there are areas in East Harlem that could handle it. Now, I didn't say 35, but they can handle it. The East Harlem transit hub areas are the ideal locations for those types, not 35, those type of higher buildings.
Other questions for Chair Collier?
I believe that we agreed that the R9 is okay to work with around the special districts, but there are other areas where we really should be looking below. And the issue we have with that is that we know that the mandatory inclusionary housing does not kick in until it's R9. That's what we've been grappling with. No more?
Thank you, as always, Chair Collier.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your service. Our next speaker in opposition is Angel Mescain. Is Mr. Mescain here? Okay, thank you. Our next speaker in opposition is Robert Joseph.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Robert Joseph. I'm a project manager at the Municipal Art Society of New York. The Municipal Art Society of New York has a number of critical concerns that we urge the city to address before we can support the East Harlem rezoning proposal and the East Harlem Housing Plan. As discussed in the full version of our testimony, we have recommendations regarding the undercounting of available development sites, potential displacement of area residents, shadow impacts, and the provision and protection of public space, as well as broader matters of long-term affordability and preservation of existing dwelling units. Given time constraints, I will only comment on potential displacement and the inaccuracy of the socioeconomic conditions evaluated in the DEIS. MAS finds the reasonable worst-case development scenario, which frames the evaluation of the draft environmental impact statement, does not accurately represent the most conservative potential development projection under the zoning proposal, and thus could affect the accuracy of the socioeconomic conditions evaluation. The rezoning area has 521 multifamily residential buildings that are underbuilt based on current zoning. While we acknowledge that there are reasonable arguments for excluding certain underbuilt multifamily buildings, such as lots currently under construction, the city's calculation may underestimate future development facilitated by the rezoning. 28 of the underbuilt properties contain rent-stabilized units registered with the New York State Division of Housing and Community Renewal, and another 72 are likely to contain rent-stabilized units not registered with the state agency. Although the draft housing plan outlines strategies for preserving these affordable units, MAS believes these measures do not go far enough to ensure that rent-stabilized units would not be lost and is concerned that the rezoning will exacerbate these trends. To strengthen the analysis of the DEIS, MAS recommends that the reasonable worst-case development scenario be amended to include underbuilt properties with rent-stabilized units as part of the selection criteria for development sites. This will provide a better understanding of potential direct residential displacement resulting from the rezoning. At the least, the city should provide an alternative analysis in the FEIS that evaluates these properties. We are submitting a full version of our testimony which provides further details on the aforementioned issue, as well as expanding on several others. We reiterate that our support for the rezoning and housing plan is conditioned upon the incorporation of our recommendations in the proposal and final EIS evaluation. We are also making maps and data sets used for this analysis available to the public in our blog section at our website, mas.org. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on this critically important issue.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Questions for Mr. Joseph? Commissioner Deleuze.
Mr. Joseph, thanks for being here. I think you've raised an incredibly important point that speaks to a pretty significant blind spot in the environmental review. I'm just wondering if MIS or groups that you're allied with have actually surveyed tenants in those properties at all? And so that was one question. The other question I have is, I'm just wondering if you would recommend expanding the analysis in the DEIS not just to rent-stabilized buildings or potentially rent-stabilized buildings that are underbuilt, but all. Because one thing that I have found is that even if they're not underbuilt because of the risk of harassment, even if a building is fully occupied and fully built out, that it's still at risk of demolition.
I do not believe that we have surveyed tenants, but I will get back to you. Our organization will get back to you in a letter with the full answers to both that question and whether to expand to all units. Thank you, Commissioner Deleuze.
Yes, Commissioner Efron.
Thank you for your testimony. I have read, I think, what you've put out there previously, and I'm encouraged to know that there are maps. I haven't seen them yet. Based on those maps, though, is there a particular area of concentration, particularly one avenue or one small part of the larger neighborhood that you think is particularly risky as development?
I don't have the ability to comment on that at the moment, but I will ensure that we address that in a letter to you as well. Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Joseph.
Thank you.
Our next speaker in opposition is George Janes.
Good afternoon. My name is George Janes. I'm a planner. I'm engaged by Community Board 11. For the record, actually, I take no position on the rezoning. I'm here today just to speak on the process, and I speak only for myself.
Raise the microphone.
Thank you. Okay. In 2013, the Community Board recommended an upzoning for Park Avenue, which included inclusionary housing areas where affordable housing was mandatory, with more and deeper affordability than the optional program. At the time, the concept of mandatory inclusionary housing was just an idea. Bloomberg was still mayor. Housing New York was unwritten. These were radical ideas, and they came from the community. Ideas that people thought could not be done. Yet 3 years later, mandatory inclusionary housing is law, and the city was looking to map it in East Harlem, as the Community Board asked. The speaker was supportive. Her office, along with community partners, led the development of the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. All New York talked about how the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan could be used as a new model for planning and zoning in New York City. Unlike any other rezoning, I think, that's come before the CPC, the table in East Harlem was set for success. Yet, New York refused to sit at the table. The East Harlem Neighborhood Plan called for a large rezoning area. It wanted affordable housing in all new developments in East Harlem. Yet the proposal calls for a small area, leaving out large chunks of the community. The East Harlem Neighborhood Plan called for a modest upzoning, enough to trigger MIH. The proposal calls for a large upzoning to the highest densities. It got so bad that one of the main community partners in the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan actually protested the community meetings organized by DCP. Every commissioner should review those tapes of those meetings or the wild community board hearing for yourself. This was supposed to be easy. What happened? As you consider this question, let me leave you with just one observation. Under Bloomberg, the city moved faster than anyone thought possible on rezonings. I recall one former city staff member saying publicly, leadership in planning is first deciding what you want to do and then taking the steps to achieve that goal. If you think that, you can't do community planning or even listen to community desires. While the current administration is undoubtedly better than the last one when it comes to community engagement, I don't think community planning or even well-done community plans like the East Harlem neighborhood plans have a place of respect in our process. It's an issue of culture. We don't have a culture of community partnership and working collaboratively with the community, and that's a problem. If the troubles of this rezoning teaches us anything, it is that we need to change this culture and embrace community planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Janes. Questions? Thank you so much. Our next speaker in opposition is Pablo Torres.
Good afternoon. Pablo Torres, I'm here to speak on behalf of the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan Steering Committee. East Harlem is a community in the midst of change. The dichotomy of that change is stark. While we continue to cope with many of the social and economic impacts of poverty, it is also a community of luxury housing within a short commute to Midtown Manhattan. Our neighborhood has a median household income of $30,000 and a poverty rate of 37%, but also has the fourth highest rate of housing price appreciation in the city, with the median sale price of condominiums at $723,000. Our community required a neighborhood plan, not only to address the anticipated growth in population, but to ensure that growth, coupled with strategic public investments, could support the needs of the existing lower-income community. Our steering committee worked for almost a year to develop the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, which we believe achieved that balance, proposing a modest growth strategy that include much-needed affordable housing and community investments, without adversely impacting neighborhood character. Our plan included a modest upzoning spread across the entire community, which would trigger the city's mandatory inclusionary housing program. We believe that spreading the impacts more broadly through a moderate increase in building scale in exchange for affordable housing could benefit the community while also preserving the character of East Harlem and minimizing displacement. So we were disappointed with the rezoning proposal that the Department of City Planning introduced in response to our rezoning framework. City Planning proposed the highest residential density allowable for 3rd and Park Avenues and ignored the steering committee's proposal to upzone the entire length of 1st Avenue, the area between 96 and 104th Street, and the lower stretches of Madison Avenue. These were two very different strategies. The community's approach, which spreads a modest rezoning over a larger area to minimize impacts, and the city planning approach that crams the maximum amount of density in a much smaller area, which will result in building scales that are completely out of context with the rest of the community. We believe this was a missed opportunity. While neighborhood rezonings must create new opportunities for affordable housing, they must also preserve the integrity of existing communities. Our steering committee continues to advocate for our neighborhood plan, which includes a rezoning, but also includes key investments that are important to the future of our community. Neighborhoods are more than just zoning, and planning isn't just about real estate. We have prioritized 46 recommendations from our original neighborhood plan, which includes a comprehensive strategy to proactively preserve existing affordable housing, along with our cultural heritage, build new affordable housing on publicly owned sites, invest in the human capital pipeline from daycare to employment, and considers the open space, health, and environmental needs required to improve our quality of life. Our steering committee does not support this ULURP application in its current state. We encourage the City Planning Commission to reduce the density of the rezoning proposal on Park and 3rd Avenues to be more consistent with our neighborhood plan, and request that the administration direct its city agencies to respond more meaningfully to our prioritized recommendations, making the necessary commitments to advance a comprehensive neighborhood plan. We believe a balanced approach that plans for the current needs of our existing low-income households, as well as the future impacts of growth in strengthening the real estate market, is still possible. We hope that City Planning Commission and administration will partner with us in an effort to achieve these shared goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Torres, and thank you to you and all the other members of the steering committee for the service. Questions from the commission? Yes, Commissioner Delauze.
Hi, thanks for being here, and really thank you to you and your coalition for all the work. I'm familiar with how much work that is.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering if, I'm really going to ask the same question of you that was asked of the chair of Community Board 11 about the follow-up proposal to lower the heights. And I'm just wondering how that's been discussed at the coalition, how that's been taken, and other things that you would have us, the top 3 to 4 things you would have us prioritize as we move forward in this process.
Sure. In terms of the heights, again, I think it's just two different frameworks that we're using. So we thought that some heights spread across just would stay within the character of the neighborhood and not create these monsters in the neighborhood. In terms of priorities, again, it's the heights, but it's also the affordability, right? So I think we've investigated a lot, had a lot of talks with HPD and other folks about affordability bands, and not all affordable housing is affordable, and I think it has to be a plan that speaks to our actual neighborhood numbers and, like what our levels of affordability are. So I think that's really where the priority is, and, I think all the 46 recommendations are important. They're not all CPC things, right? So I think what we're looking for is CPC and the administration to really push agencies to do some of these things. And we've had some good meetings with agencies, but other ones have not been so positive. So again, a lot of time and thought was taken to the steering committee recommendations. It was a true discussion with the community. These weren't things that I thought of and that, other members of the steering committee. It's stuff that we heard from the community that are important to the community. And so I think, again, the affordability is maybe the #1 issue that we'd like people to look at. And also, I think there's a way to balance height across the district and look at some things that they didn't look at. So I would say those are kind of the priorities.
If I may, just, we heard that there's been movement on the commitment for deeper affordability, at least 20% of the units at I want to say it's 30% of AMI or 40% of AMI and below. Can you maybe be more specific about what the coalition is hoping to see relative to that more updated information?
Sure, more than 20%. Yeah.
Clear, simple answer. Other questions for Mr. Torres? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will now move to 5 speakers in support, numbers 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, starting with Pam McCulloch.
Hi, good afternoon. Hello? Okay. First off, my name is Paul McCulloch. I'm actually...
Sorry.
Sorry.
I realized I wasn't reading it correctly. Apologies.
No, that's all right. I know a few people with that name as well. Let me know when you're ready.
All yours.
So I'm a resident of El Barrio in East Harlem. My name is Paul McCulloch. I was a staff attorney for the New York City Commission on Human Rights, which is how I qualified for Mitchell-Lama housing in 2006, and I've lived in the neighborhood ever since. I was on the board for the 1,500 units in East River Landing and ran on a platform of improving accountability, transparency, security, maintenance, and community engagement. And I'm here to lend one perspective from the neighborhood, but it's one that got me elected. So I see developments that underscore the need for this rezoning, because essentially it's an opportunity in this growth to more effectively implement tools for the accountability of housing groups, for the continued and protected affordable housing for people, and for maintenance of the character that makes the neighborhood amazing. So the neighborhood consists of the people, the richness of the character that they can express in the community around them, and the resources the city can provide to help them maintain and enrich that character. So the first item is affordable housing. As I mentioned, I live in Mitchell-Lama housing, and there are many existing problems with lack of transparency in housing lotteries, the technology used in the system, and as I understand it, those systems are being improved. And there's also existing lack of transparency for various boards in many of the affordable housing units. Now, based off of that and based on my experience on one of the boards, one cannot assume that current housing organizations want to engage or enrich the community. That's why the opportunity for more affordable housing provides an opportunity to actually further integrate with the community and bring the community together. Additionally, there are existing problems with current housing. It's an unsustainable model. Currently, there are groups that have either multiple generations in their households or occupy sometimes 8, 9, or 10 different apartments within the same housing complex as internal transfers expand. So the lesson from that is current housing density is creating problems. For this element, the zoning plan is right to help the HPD refocus, to provide additional education to landlords, to provide additional guidance, representation, and protection to tenants. And in terms of the displacement issue, I think that more affordable housing makes it so that those people who would otherwise be more and more condensed into existing housing units have opportunities to expand and apply for affordable housing within the same neighborhood and help the neighborhood retain its character that actually makes it really beautiful. The second element is basically economic development. Some stores are closing or vacant. There are some stores that are like the bike chop shop or the liquor store that sells to alcoholics. I mean, some stores maybe should close, but there are others that are actively opening up. They're doing great things for the neighborhood, and they're also making strides in integrating the community. There's one cafe that actually on Tuesday nights has a bring your artists, bring your culture, and we're going to have Tuesday night coffee, and it's on 109th Street, great place. But on top of that, the city has proposals to also promote local businesses. I think when it comes to development of businesses, I think that the businesses that help contribute to the positive character development would be good.
Mr. McCulloch, I'm going to have to ask if you would submit your written testimony, the commission would welcome receiving it.
Okay.
And questions from Mr. McCulloch? Thank you.
Thanks.
Our next speaker in support is Ron Wade.
Good afternoon, Chairman Largo and panel. My name is Ron Wade. I'm from Local 33J. I'm an executive board member. I'm here testifying on behalf of my union regarding the East Harlem zoning and the Sendero Verde project. Over 1,200 members live in East Harlem, 33J, and over 700 of those members work in the neighborhoods. These men and women maintain, clean, and provide security services in market rate and affordable residential buildings. The well-paying building service jobs they hold allow these families to live, work, and succeed in this community. One of my top priorities for this rezoning is making sure the quality jobs get created in East Harlem. East Harlem is a diverse community of working people like me. I know many of my neighbors are struggling with low wages and unemployment. People are seeing their rents increase while their wages stay the same. New developments that include affordable housing for a mix of incomes and create jobs that pay decent wages is the only way working people will be able to continue to live in East Harlem. The Sendero Verde development can offer this as we can show in the rezoning project. And here recommendations. The borough president noted the disappointment among East Harlem neighbors, planning committee members, and the rezoning does not yet address concerns about the quality of jobs and it will create. There are three things the CPC can demand to make sure these concerns are addressed. One, a guarantee from the city that any developer, including those at Sendero Verde, receive public subsidies or building in public land will require to pay prevailing wages. Two, a guarantee from private developers that they too will pay the prevailing wages in the industry. And three, a local hiring plan that prioritizes offering jobs placements to East Harlem residents. All these recommendations are in the East Harlem neighborhood planning. We believe they should be in the final neighborhood rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker in support is Deborah Goddard.
Good afternoon, Chairman Lago and Commissioners. My name is Deborah Goddard. I'm the Acting Executive Vice President for Real Estate with New York City Housing Authority. We are here in support of the zoning plan. Importantly, about 34,000 NYCHA residents live in East Harlem, representing more than a quarter of the neighborhood. We support the rezoning because it invests in our residents' community to improve their quality of life. The rezoning aligns with the vision of NYCHA's long-term strategic plan, Next Generation NYCHA, to create safe, clean, and connected communities. It's important to know what Next Gen NYCHA is doing in East Harlem and across the city and how these accomplishments respond to the priorities identified in the course of the neighborhood's conversations leading up to this proposal. First, through targeted investments in physical security enhancements and the efforts of our Public Safety Advisory Committee, NYCHA is working to improve safety and security. For instance, Wagner Houses is receiving security cameras, exterior lighting, and layered access security controls as part of the Mayor's Action Plan for Neighborhood Safety. Jefferson Houses is getting $3 million in similar security enhancements. The East Harlem Neighborhood Plan identified recycling as a priority, and we are happy to say that as of today, all NYCHA developments, including those in East Harlem, now have access to recycling. So we are improving operations to become a more efficient and effective landlord. Second, we are engaging residents and connecting them to the services opportunities in their communities. Another East Harlem Neighborhood Plan priority identified was for NYCHA to provide workforce training opportunities for its residents. Now, NYCHA has connected more than 6,000 residents to jobs and nearly 15,000 residents to partner services throughout Reade Zone model, which has 11 community-based partners in East Harlem. And there are 17 resident associations and a 25-member youth leadership council in East Harlem giving residents a voice in their community. Third, another of the community's priorities for the neighborhood plan was to improve engagement, communication, and information to NYCHA residents. NYCHA's resident engagements extends into all areas of our work. It is a cornerstone of our efforts to rebuild and repair public housing and build affordable housing. As part of our preservation and affordable housing developments, residents have a seat at the table and guide the work that provides and improves for their homes and communities. And I left my list. So, finally, getting to the commercial overlay component of the East Harlem rezoning, which is the aspect of the rezoning that directly affects NYCHA, we want to really strongly endorse this aspect, which will allow the zoning flexibility to provide more services and amenities for our residents. With this flexibility, we anticipate future opportunities to attract businesses such as the pharmacy and the supermarket that are located at Drew Hamilton, or the hardware store that operates at Frederick Samuel, or the laundromat and dry cleaners at Harlem River, any of which improve the quality of life for the community. We've been working closely with the Department of City Planning to be responsive to your needs. We support it and look forward to our continued collaboration.
Thank you, Ms. Goddard. Questions? Yes, Commissioner Levin.
Ms. Goddard, on the commercial overlay component, some of the comments we've received is that that aspect of the proposal really should not move forward without direct engagement with the tenants associations of the individual estates that would be affected. What plans does NYCHA have for direct engagement with the residents of the blocks along which you seek to add commercial activity?
So I want to be really clear, at this point we don't have any specific plans. We really endorse the overlay as allowing us the opportunity to have plans that when they come to the fore. As I said, all of our development proposals start with engagement at the residents, what their likes and dislikes are, and continue through the development process. At this point, we don't have any specific plans.
Okay, so is it premature to put the space in play before that engagement has taken place?
No, I think it really creates the skeleton in which it says to us and to potential partners, this is the skeleton in which we can operate. It says to our residents, this is what's possible.
Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Efron.
Thank you. Before you arrived, I had asked for a sense of the NYCHA investment in East Harlem, and I appreciate what you said. But one missing piece, at least for me, and I wonder if not for also the other commissioners, is the capital needs on major repairs for the NYCHA.
Cheryl, the reporter can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Whether you can give us some sense of the capital needs for repairs and major maintenance items outside of security needs for the public housing in East Harlem.
I did not come prepared with the list. We can certainly get it for you. As you know, it's a significant backlog across the portfolio.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you would submit that formally, we would appreciate it. Other questions for Ms. Goddard? Thank you. Our next speaker in support is Jordan Dressler. Is Mr. Dressler here? It appears not. Okay. Our next speaker in support is Sydney Renwick. Okay, we will then move on to our next series of speakers in opposition, and these are numbers 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20, beginning with Emily Parkey. Okay, good, good, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Parkey.
Hello, everyone, commissioners. My name is Emily Parkey. I am the current Director of Family and Community Engagement at DREAM, formerly Harlem RBI. We are a nonprofit with more than 26 years experience working with East Harlem youth and families through our school, after school, and summer programming. Our mission is to help the youth of East Harlem to recognize their potential and realize their dreams. I'm also a proud East Harlem resident. I live on 108th Street between 1st and 2nd Avenues, and led the subgroup for the East Harlem Neighborhood Steering Committee on pre-K, after school, and daycare. Through the steering committee, we worked very, very hard to involve our neighbors in the creation of the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. We held various meetings, various forums to ensure that the public was informed and had input. We created the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan and made numerous recommendations to the city about what the city can do to maintain the dignity and unique cultural heritage of our neighborhood throughout the rezoning process. I've worked in East Harlem for...
Ma'am, if you could please address.
So I do not support the current ULURP application, as I do not believe that it goes far enough to create housing for the low-income residents that live in our neighborhood and that nonprofits like mine serve. 91% of our school's children receive free and reduced lunch, and very few would be able to live in the neighborhood with the current rezoning plan. I would like to encourage the City Commission to re-look at the neighborhood plan and follow both the recommendations and prioritized focus areas that our group proposed. I further encourage you to consider looking at the entire zone that we proposed, which includes the entire length of First Avenue between 96th and 104th Street, and the lower stretches of Madison Avenue. It is incredibly critical to me as both a resident and a person who serves my community to ensure that low-income housing is preserved and that the kids and families who live in our neighborhood now are able to stay there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parkey. Questions for Ms. Parkey? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker in opposition is Bethany Hogan.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Bethany Hogan, and I represent New York Restoration Project on the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan Steering Committee, on which we have served for over 2 years. We are deeply proud of the work that the steering committee has delivered. Together, we have produced a comprehensive neighborhood plan that is built off of excellent community engagement and conveys a carefully composed and ambitious local vision. This plan includes rezoning, but it also outlines key investments to support the growth of the existing community. After reviewing DCP's East Harlem rezoning proposal, we feel that it fails to address many of the priorities of our plan. We believe that the lower density rezoning proposal we developed better achieves the balance between creating new affordable housing and preserving the existing character of the community. The scale of city planning rezoning proposal would adversely impact the character of our community, and we believe that it is imperative that DCP and the administration reduce the zoning densities on Park and 3rd Avenues, as well as make commitments to invest in community priorities that we identified in our neighborhood plan. NYRP leads the open space and recreation subgroup of the East Harlem neighborhood plan. Our group identified 4 priorities that we feel the administration must deeply consider. Our first priority is that our community's open spaces require significant capital investment. There is an urgent need for more comfort stations at our local parks, particularly at the Harlem River Park sports fields. We particularly take issue with the DEIS's classification of the East River Esplanade as in good condition. It has long been in desperate need of repairs. It suffers from very limited accessibility due to its proximity to the FDR Drive and having only a small number of entrance points for pedestrians. Much of the path infrastructure has deteriorated, and there were 2 major collapses in the past year alone. These deteriorations are a critical concern today, but they stand to only worsen, with costs only growing greater the longer they remain ignored. Pier 107 needs to be replaced. Its current condition has been deemed by municipal colleagues and others in our community as unacceptable, and we need to move forward with a new design that better connects East Harlem residents to their waterfront. Our second priority is that there is a great need in our community for new and improved open spaces. The East Harlem community is already underserved in open space even without the anticipated population increases of a proposed rezoning. The DEIS calculates a current open space ratio of 0.834 acres per 1,000 residents, which is well below the city's guidelines of 2.5 acres per 1,000 residents and well below the city average of 1.5. The East Harlem community needs to be better served in open space. This includes improvements to the East River Esplanade, Thomas Jefferson Park, Marcus Garvey Park, and greater investment in community gardens and NYCHA grounds. We also need new open space. We are enthusiastic about the opportunity posed by the new Harlem River Greenway link, but significant investments are needed for this ambition to be realized. Our third priority is accessibility to the waterfront and resiliency. Investments are needed to support access to Randall's Island's 125th and 103rd Street entrances. This includes wayfinding, programming, promotion, and a better pedestrian/cycling planning. We also believe that green infrastructure design should be included in any public realm improvements that DCP considers, including RFPs for public sites. We would also like to see an outreach effort that focuses on DEP green infrastructure grants programs targeted at East Harlem property owners.
Thank you, Ms. Hogan. Questions from the Commission? Thank you. Our next speaker in opposition is David Nocenti.
Chair Lago, Vice Chair Knuckles, members of the Commission. Is that better? Okay. Chair Lago, Vice Chair Knuckles, and members of the Commission, thank you. My name is David Nocenti. I'm the Executive Director of Union Settlement Association. For those of you who don't know Union Settlement, we've been in East Harlem since 1895. We provide a broad array of education, wellness, and community building programs for the low-income residents of the community. We're also the third largest employer in East Harlem with over 400 employees, many of whom were born and raised in East Harlem. And based on that 122-year history and our deep knowledge of the community, we have grave concerns about the proposal that's before you today. You've heard a lot about the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. You're very familiar with it, so I'm not going to reiterate a lot of what's said before. But it was really, and I want to echo George James's comments, it was, sort of a perfect bottom-up, community-based, coalition building, creation of a vision for the neighborhood. And the concerns that we have is based upon, it really violates a lot of the principles of that East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. I was on the steering committee. I chaired the Economic Development, Workforce Development, and Small Business subgroup for the East Harlem Neighborhood Planning Group. And I'm not going to reiterate a lot of what's said before, but the plan proposed broad, modest upzoning in East Harlem. But what you have before you ignores large swaths of East Harlem and concentrates high-density development in a very narrow area. And that's really going to change the character of the community. The other thing the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan did was try to maximize the benefits of mandatory inclusionary zoning in order to get as much affordable housing as possible. But when you exclude a lot of the housing stock from the rezoning and don't have those covered by the mandatory inclusionary zoning, you're losing a lot of opportunity for affordable housing. Another concern is the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan looked deeply at the existing conditions in East Harlem, which you've heard before, 37% of people living in poverty, $30,000 median income, overcrowded schools, and tried to come up with recommendations that would address that, as opposed to coming up with high-density development that would exacerbate a lot of those other conditions that exist. And then again, I want to talk briefly about the economic development piece of it because I was the chair of that subgroup. We put a lot of emphasis on local hiring, funding job placement and career training, satellite workforce one center, paying prevailing wages, and encouraging local purchasing. I do want to commend the Mayor's Office and SBS and the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development. They've been working with us on a number of those issues, but as of now, there's no real firm commitment for them. And so I fully support, and Union Settlement fully supports, the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan and also the recommendations that you've received from the steering committee. And we believe that it's still possible to balance the joint goals that we have, and we ask for the City Planning Commission and Department of City Planning and the Mayor's Office to work with the steering committee to try to achieve those goals.
Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
for the
Nocenti.
opportunity. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions from commissioners?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker in opposition is Alexander Adams. Alexander Adams. Okay. Our next speaker in opposition is Raymond Tirado.
Thank you. Everybody from the CVH that's here right now, would like you guys to stand, please. I'm a resident of Del Barrio and been living there all my life. I was born in Mount Sinai Hospital, and I haven't left. So we're talking over 5 decades, just to say how long I've been invested in the neighborhood. And I am in the rent control department, and I'm being harassed. And I can go through the litany what everybody else is going through, because I'm sure I'm not the only one that's going through this. We start off with not picking up the garbage, not cleaning the building, let the stench continue. Then we start losing cold water, then we lose hot water. Then the boiler breaks during the winter time. I mean, these are tactics that are in the playbook to get rid of us out of Harlem. I am one that don't want to leave, and I'm not going to leave. At least it's not going to be easy. So I'm fighting for this situation right now. And it's sad that there is a lot of people that can't defend themselves or actually come up here and speak to you guys today to let you know of the injustice that's going on in the barrio. I'm also a Local 79 member in the union. And I kind of find it hard to support myself to actually live with what I'm seeing with the rents there. So if I can't make it, I mean, who's actually going to be able to live here? Now, if this is the tale of two cities, let's take care of our people who don't have, because that's the other part of the city. Now, in this era of Trumpism and alternative facts, we got to get our facts here together, because the East Harlem plan seems that we have a lot of alternative facts in there that's not coming out the way we want it, at least what not the community is shouting out for. We need you guys to look at it, study it, and see what the community is asking for. And basically, to be truthful, we need an anti-harassment certificate in Harlem right now. Not next year, not 2 years from now, but we need it as immediate as possible to protect the tenants in the barrio. And as far as construction and hiring from the community, I've seen this done. So it's not impossible not to get it done. I think we should let go of this profit organizations, take care of for profit, and let's get the nonprofit organizations in here to start working on these conditions that we're asking for, because I think they may share a light. Because like I said, I've seen it done with nonprofit organizations that they built, union, hired from the community, and have affordability. Now we got to try to coordinate this. We all have our minds set in saving the barrio, right? The people here are from the hood. And I thank you, and I hope you take our situation into hand, especially during this time that we're running through, that we're not sure of what we're going to be able to get from the government.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tirado, and for the members of your group as well. Questions for Mr. Tirado?
Sir, have you, with regard to the tenant harassment that you spoke of, have you reported that to the city, and have you gotten a response?
I have reported it, yes. And we're in court, but their pockets are much deeper than mine. And they could delay this as much as they want, or keep on delaying it more or less. But we are in court. We're going a year in court right now. I still have no boiler. In the wintertime, I'm still putting the plastic in my windows to keep myself warm in my room. I can't even have my kids stay with me because of the conditions that's in there. And it's horrendous. And, you know, and don't kid you, I'm not as strong as I look. I came close to a mental breakdown before. But I found religion, and I thank God every day that I'm able to speak about these situations and to continue to fight this, because this is something that I feel deeply inside. Because like I said, I lived there for over 50 years. I don't know what it is not to live in the barrio.
Thank you for coming down.
Thank you. Our next speaker is the Manhattan Borough President, Gail Brewer.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair Lago and Commissioners. I am Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, and I am here to speak in opposition to the New York City Department of City Planning's application to rezone East Harlem and my conditional approval of the Department of HPD's application for Sendo Verde at East 111th Street. Those are the topics. On the application to rezone East Harlem, I recommended a straight no when I was part of my... Quiet, please. The DCP proposal shares broader goals with the East Harlem neighborhood plan about the need for required affordable housing, active street walls, and concentrating new commercial use along the viaduct to better utilize that area. I am grateful for city planning and their sister agencies' involvement in the East Harlem neighborhood plan process and their subsequent meetings with local stakeholders to discuss next steps. Therefore, I was perplexed, very perplexed, given the extraordinary amount of time that staff from the city put into these efforts, their guiding purpose, which we understood to be that the community's self-defined vision be central to the final plans, but all of that was overlooked. Neighborhood character matters. This neighborhood has an amazing character. And despite our clear recommendations, the administration is not taking the community's plan seriously. Neighborhood planning is difficult. The process of bringing disparate voices together is challenging and requires a deep knowledge of constituencies and the building of trust. East Harlem must have responsible growth and smart investment that protects the neighborhood's character. And all of these efforts do require a little bit less density. They can't have too much construction or too many market units for not enough affordable units to offset the loss of rent-stabilized units and the families they house. So new as-of-right development continues in East Harlem under the current zoning framework and with no requirements for affordable housing. Yes, rents continue to rise, threatening affordability and neighborhood cohesion. What is now lacking are investments in infrastructure and public realm improvements and social services that address the community's needs. We must plan appropriately to protect the current population before we allow for new significant growth. To accomplish this, the rezoning plan must seek to preserve existing affordable housing first in the rental market where we face the greatest threat to its displacement. Second, through a long-term targeted financial commitment to repair and maintain existing NYCHA housing. That must be on the list also. Then next, new development must create housing that is permanently affordable to neighborhood residents. The key is to limit the kind of and location of market rate development that increases displacement. Finally, we must, as I have always maintained, require that development respect the neighborhood's physical as well as cultural character. The aid text filed by DCP slightly reduces allowable heights that will allow for a broader look at height limits. The new tool to shape the proposal to the community's vision is a welcome addition to the application. In the interest of time, I will touch on a few points in which I disagree with the administration and refer you to my official recommendation, which, as you know, has more details. Topics where I strongly disagree with the applicant's proposal include 1, the narrowing of the zoning boundaries from those proposed in the original EHNP, that's the community's plan, a greater allowance of as-of-right parking garages, this is where I disagree, and mapping commercial overlays on New York City Public Housing Authority campuses without further study and development-specific discussions with the residents. I'm also dismayed that Landmarks Preservation Commission had not provided a thorough response to the list of potential landmarks identified by the community. Cultural and historic preservation were strongly prioritized by the steering committee and echoed by numerous residents in many meetings. The lack of progress on this issue indicates that the city did not recognize the unique physical and cultural landmarks that make East Harlem distinct from other neighborhoods. And we know that Community Board 11, and I want to thank them very much, acting in concert with the EHNP, the community, recommend specific improvements to the rezoning framework, but here again, these efforts have largely been ignored. Finally, and hard to address, as I know, is the need for commitments on how we can achieve deeper affordability in the planned affordable housing. The EHNP called for a minimum of 20% of affordable units to be affordable to those earning 30% of AMI or less. We have barely been able to meet that target in most projects on city-owned land. If we can't do it there, how are we going to do it on private development? While I supported the administration's mandatory inclusionary housing program 2 years ago, and I was one of the few electeds to do so, I recognize that somewhat higher density would be required in order to build a lot of affordable housing. It's new. But the degree of density would have to be consistent with neighborhood context and community input. Here, the community gave extensive, thoughtful, and informed input, but the administration could not see its way to support the most significant elements of the community's recommendations. For these reasons, I say no to the proposal. East Harlem needs a plan in which new construction better preserves neighborhood context, makes detailed upfront commitments to affordable housing preservation, spreads new development across a wider area, and addresses the many other needs that were identified by this community in the process that produced the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. Regarding 111th Street, after careful review, I believe the proposal put forward by HPD and the proposed development team is appropriate and would contribute to a better site plan and relationship between the buildings and the neighborhood. However, my support for the application does come with specific concerns and conditions. 111th Street, as we know, is already a location with a profound importance and part of the fabric of the community. Based on conversations, I understand that HPD has always planned to develop affordable housing for this site. And given the depth of the housing crisis, and particularly in Community Board 11, affordable housing is appropriate. The applicant and the proposed developer have outlined a compelling proposal, and the concept plan as proposed appears to be a genuine attempt at achieving the elements of the EHNP. That said, more can be done to improve it. While I applaud the developer's commitment to make all of the units income restricted, 60% of the units are not permanently affordable. Only 40% are. As someone who has dealt for decades with the expiring affordability of the Mid-to-Lama program, it is disheartening to see the city repeat a recipe for future affordable housing loss and resident displacement. City-owned land represents one of the few places where we can require permanent affordability, and we shouldn't let that slip away. Also, CB11's recommendation calls for a mission-driven organization that is based in Harlem to be part of the development team and asks that the board be included in the choosing of that entity. Both recommendations were ignored. I am a strong believer in working closely with mission-driven developers and community land trusts to preserve affordability in the long term. I would encourage HPD to heed those recommendations and make them standard practice so that public land continues to serve the public interest in perpetuity. Thank you for the chance to testify today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Borough President. Madam Borough President? Madam Borough President, if I might note that even when you disagree with the department, I always so admire you and appreciate
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. You could always change your mind.
Would you mind taking questions from some of the commissioners? Thank you. Commissioner Cantor.
You know, it's always a pleasure listening to you.
Thank you. Even though you're from Queens, I'd love to hear from you.
I was about to say I'm not a Manhattan resident, but you always make sense too. But I have a problem. We speak to the desire to have more affordable housing. We speak to the idea of reducing the heights of some buildings. We speak to the idea of reducing bulk. There's an inconsistency there. The cost of a brick is...
You got to move out so I can see them. Thanks. It's okay.
The cost of a
I know everybody in the room, so go ahead.
The cost of a brick in an affordable apartment building is the same as it is in a luxury building. The cost of sheetrock is the same. The cost of concrete is the same. The cost of rebar is the same. All the hard costs are virtually identical for the apartment that is built for a free market versus affordable housing. And I believe one of the reasons that these plans came as to allow more bulk and more density is exactly that, to make it attractive enough for a developer to come in and build the affordable housing, which is probably, I'm saying probably because I'm not a developer, which is probably marginally profitable for him, if at all, in terms of the affordable component, because he expects to make it back with the bulk and with the higher floors and with the higher rents. How do we reconcile these basic disagreements, not disagreements, dichotomies?
Well, there are a couple of things. Again, I'm like you, I'm not a developer. I mean, I always would put Felice Machete in charge of everything, and then we would have affordable housing. That's Gail Brewer's comment. But I would also state that I would like to see more nonprofits building, because then you would have, you'd still have the building, because you do want jobs and you do want housing. But the issue is when you have to put the profit in there, then I can understand the challenges of the developer. At the very least, maybe a public-private partnership where you have both entities purchasing and building. And certainly where we have the public land, I would love to see a nonprofit be the developer. That's one suggestion. Then the second one is, I must admit this may not be popular, but I believe in the MIH, I understand the concept, but do we have to go to the maximum? Maybe we have a little bit less housing, but we don't disturb the entire height of the situation. So those are some suggestions that I would, in other words, we don't go to maximum density. And then we don't often get maximum affordability, but we have to work more on the preservation. You can't imagine how many people, even with all the attorneys that the mayor and the city council have to their credit paid for and are paying for. You have the preferential rate, you have the MCI, you have, and I could go on with all the challenges of buildings where the market, particularly Manhattan, prevails. We don't have enough support for keeping people in their homes. So those are just some suggestions, but the nonprofit, I would believe, would be a better way to go. And others will talk about land trust and so on. But we have to figure out a way that we have the buildings built where there's not as much profit necessarily, and the owners need it, but we need to work more with the nonprofit community is what I would say.
Yeah. Commissioner Efron.
Thank you so much for your testimony and for your written testimony and for the mention of the NORCs, which I do think is an important aspect of this community. There was not a list attached of the landmarks or the idea that you have for landmarks preservation. Is there any way your office could get that to us?
Yes, we'd be glad to. I have to say, when we did the East Midtown proposal, I want to thank LPC. It was done concurrently, and it made for a much better final product. I don't know why it's not possible now, but I have to say they did a wonderful job on East Midtown. Every single proposal for a landmark was reviewed, and at the same time, even before we did the final recommendation, theirs was done.
Other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
We'll now continue with 5 speakers in support, numbers 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. The first being LaShawn Brown.
Good afternoon, Chair Lago and members of the Commission. I'm LaShawn Brown Dudley, Acting Assistant Commissioner for the Harlem Neighborhood Health Action Centers, a bureau of the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene's Center for Health Equity. Today I will describe what we do at the Neighborhood Health Action Centers and our role in the East Harlem neighborhood planning effort. In particular, I want to highlight the work we are doing to strengthen neighborhood health through the Action Center, which directly supports the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan's recommendations. Under Commissioner Bassett, racial equity, social justice, and inclusion have formed the Health Department's guiding principles. In 2014, the department formed the Center for Health Equity to strengthen and amplify the department's work to eliminate health inequities rooted in historical and contemporary injustices and discrimination. One of our key approaches is advancing health equity is to invest in key neighborhoods by working directly and consistently in and with our neighborhoods. We are doing that by reinvigorating underutilized apartment buildings and co-locating health programs, clinical services, community-based organizations, and sister agencies all under one roof. The Action Center is an extension of the former district public health offices that were re-energized 14 years ago, and a reimagining of the neighborhood health center movement that first began in New York City in the early 1900s. The Action Center aims to better serve community members by providing important programs and services, connecting them with resources, and serving as a space for residents and partners to convene, plan, and organize. 3 Action Centers are now operational, which are located in East Harlem, Brownsville, Brooklyn, and Tremont in the Bronx. The East Harlem Action Center occupies 2 physical spaces, one at 115th Street and another at 110th. And provides a wide range of co-located services such as nutrition education, mental health services for youth and families, assistance with health insurance and SNAP enrollment, and chronic disease management. In recognition of the need for more primary care services embedded in the community, the administration has provided capital support to establish a federally qualified health center at the Action Center. The Action Center will also have a teaching kitchen for nutrition education and workforce development. We recently opened a family wellness suite to support healthy outcomes for our Little New Yorkers and designated meeting space for neighborhood use. Also key to the work of the Action Center are our referral specialists who link residents to neighborhood resources and better integrate public health and healthcare neighborhood opportunities. In addition to providing and linking residents to services, the Action Center builds trusted relationships to address upstream structural barriers to achieving optimal health. Health is more than just health care. Good health depends on well-paying jobs, affordable and safe housing, access to healthy food, strong social networks, and other neighborhood conditions. Therefore, our public health work must address the social determinants of health, as well as amplify the voices and power of our neighborhoods we live in.
I'm afraid, Ms. Brown, we're going to have to ask you to wrap it up. If you could submit your written testimony, we'd welcome it.
Okay, I'll just wrap it up here. In order to align with the recommendations of the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan and with support from the New York State Health Foundation, we partnered with New York Academy of Medicine.
I'm afraid, Ms. Brown, we're going to have to stop the testimony.
Okay, all right.
Questions for Ms. Brown? Thank you, and we look forward to getting the written testimony.
Thank you.
Our next speaker in support is Ashley Putnam.
Thank you. Thank you to the Commission. Also very pleased to be presenting after partners we consider great partners in our work from the Borough Manhattan office and from the Department of Health Mental Hygiene.
Could you perhaps lift up the microphone a bit? Thank you.
I'm too tall, is that what you're saying? Okay.
Never too tall.
So by means of introduction, my name is Ashley Putnam. I'm from the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development. Our office has been engaged in the planning process for East Harlem as part of our continued commitment to creating pathways to opportunity for all New Yorkers. In 2014, our office released a report called Career Pathways, One City Working Together, which committed to connecting economic development activities to job seekers. We are proud to work with our colleagues in city planning and other agencies here to fulfill these promises in East Harlem. In understanding the needs of East Harlem, our office met with community organizations that are currently providing workforce services to the neighborhood. One such organization is here today, is the East Harlem Talent Network, which provides job placement services to East Harlem residents through partnership with the Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone and CB11. Networks like these have been mentioned as best practices for connecting workforce and economic development activities as they outreach to local businesses. In addition to this resource, the City of New York provides workforce funding to services in East Harlem through programs like Cornerstone, Young Adult Sectoral Employment Program, NYCHA Resident Employment Services, Summer Youth Employment, and Adult Literacy. Knowing that these resources exist, our approach to looking at East Harlem was really taking into account two questions. One is, how do we connect residents to jobs right now? And the second is, how do we connect residents to jobs that will be made available in the future? For many East Harlem residents, the need for living wage employment cannot wait for the opportunities that will be created by the rezoning. Thus, we reached out to our anchor institutions that have been longtime members of the community and are committed to hiring local residents. Several months ago, with the support of the Speaker's Office, we met with Mount Sinai and the East Harlem Talent Network, along with the New York Alliance for Careers in Healthcare, to discuss further employment needs. Mount Sinai has been a strong partner in East Harlem and actually last year hired over 700 East Harlem residents. By building on this partnership between Mount Sinai and the East Harlem Talent Network, our hope is to connect residents to high-skilled, living wage careers right now in the healthcare industry. Thinking ahead to opportunities that will come into the neighborhood, the Mayor's Office is committed to connecting job seekers to opportunities that are created by development projects. As mentioned by Greg Bishop, in 2015, our office launched Hire NYC, which is a program that requires any developer or vendor receiving city subsidies engage with the workforce system in finding local talent. We are excited to partner with our colleagues at Workforce One to ensure that these projects built in this neighborhood will provide job opportunities to low-income New Yorkers. Like many neighborhoods, East Harlem residents need access to job opportunities both now and in the future. Our office supports the East Harlem Plan as it creates economic opportunity and provides a pathway for local talent. We look forward to continuing our work to connect East Harlem residents to employment opportunities. Happy to take your questions.
Questions for Ms. Putnam? Thank you, Ms. Putnam.
Yeah, thanks.
Our next speaker in support is Allison Grant.
A little shorter. Good afternoon. My name is Allison Grant. It's good to see you twice in one day. I am the Chief of Staff of the New York City Administration for Children's Services Division of Early Care and Education. I'm here today to testify on behalf of the ACS administration in favor of the East Harlem rezoning proposal. ACS is pleased to be here and to have been an ongoing partner in the East Harlem neighborhood study. Our participation in the study has focused on several objectives identified by the steering committee, in short, related to our work in providing subsidized childcare to this community. ACS presented to the steering committee in February, sharing an overview of our work and answering their questions. As you know, ACS oversees one of the largest subsidized childcare systems in the country, serving approximately 100,000 children from the ages of 6 weeks to 13 years. We do so via our contracted system named Early Learn and via the provision of childcare vouchers. Early Learn NYC, our contracted system, offers subsidized, high-quality care to families who earn up to 200% of the federal poverty level in either center-based programs or home-based care. Programs operate 8 to 10 hours a day, Monday through Friday, year-round, and offer comprehensive services, including developmental screenings, family support, and health and mental health services. Funding is provided via New York State by the Child Care Developmental Block Grant and the federal government via Head Start. All children ages 4 to 5 in Early Learn are part of NYC's Pre-K for All, and further, as of this fall, our 3-year-olds will also be a part of the new initiative 3K for All, which we're excited to be working on jointly with DOE. In regards to East Harlem specifically, there are 28 Early Learn center-based programs serving children from 2 to 5 years old and 2 family child care networks in which children are served in home-based settings. We're excited to share that as of July 1st, in response to community need, ACS converted 2 of our classrooms at those 28 locations to serve more toddlers in the East Harlem community. This effort was a part of our conversion of several hundred Early Learn Head Start seats to early Head Start seats in programs throughout Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. We look forward to continuing to partner with our programs and families in this community to best meet their needs. Further, ACS is pleased to partner with city planning and other city agencies to achieve the city's goal of a comprehensive neighborhood plan. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Grant. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let me see if I can get this right. Vito Mustachulo? Don't.
I'm speaking on his behalf.
Okay.
I'll explain.
Thank you.
I am not Vito. Good afternoon, Chair Lago and members of the City Planning Commission. My name is Anne Marie Santiago, Assistant Deputy Commissioner of the Office of Enforcement and Neighborhood Services at HPD. I am reading testimony on behalf of Vito Mustachulo, Deputy Commissioner of HPD's Office of Enforcement and Neighborhood Services, who cannot be here today. The Office of Enforcement and Neighborhood Services enforces the New York City Housing Maintenance Code and New York State Multiple Dwelling Law with the goal of ensuring that all housing remains safe and habitable. I am testifying about my office's role in support of the proposed East Harlem Community Plan. The work our divisions do every day throughout the city is critical to prevent landlords from using poor maintenance and the denial of essential services to drive tenants out of housing for which the landlord could command higher rents. Because questions have been raised about whether the proposed rezoning of East Harlem could result in increased harassment, I would like to describe the very active role we take in East Harlem, both with our everyday work and specifically in response to concerns about the rezoning plan. HPD's everyday work in East Harlem includes both reactive activities in response to complaints and proactive activities. In fiscal year 17, HPD conducted almost 16,000 inspections, citing 10,772 violations, and conducting emergency repair work as necessary to ensure that tenants can remain safely in their homes. Currently, HPD has comprehensive litigation seeking the correction of conditions and civil penalties in progress against 14 properties in East Harlem. The Alternative Enforcement Program, one of the most successful enhanced enforcement programs at HPD, is active at 11 buildings. AEP targets the most distressed buildings citywide, and the AEP statute authorizes HPD to issue orders, impose fees, and conduct enhanced repairs. Our proactive activity in East Harlem includes the Proactive Preservation Initiative, PPI, block sweeps, and the Tenant Harassment Protection Task Force. Since 2011, HPD's Division of Neighborhood Preservation has conducted an in-depth survey and assessment of 138 buildings through the PPI. 90 of those are related to the Block Sweeps Initiative, which HPD conducted this past year, and which I will talk more about in a moment. Through the PPI initiative, HPD works closely with elected officials and community groups to identify buildings which appear to be struggling with maintenance issues. Once HPD receives a referral, a building visit is conducted. The building visit may result in a referral for a full building inspection by code enforcement, a referral for litigation to our Housing Litigation Division, or a referral to a property owner for a loan with HPD, among other outcomes. Through PPI, HPD has successfully intervened with hundreds of buildings citywide to restore buildings to a code-compliant path. Through our Block Sweeps initiative, which was created in response to concerns that the community raised through conversations and meetings with HPD, our Division of Neighborhood Preservation conducted building visits to more than 400 occupied buildings in concentrated areas, certain blocks in East Harlem between August 2016 and July 2017. During the building visit, a preliminary physical assessment of the building was completed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I hope people understand that I'm being pretty strict on time. This is our 24th speaker of the 70 that we have aligned. Questions? Yes, Commissioner Efron.
You don't need to respond now, but if you could let us know what the previous year's numbers were on those same things, because the absolute numbers are impressive, but I think we would all want to see that there was an increase.
Certainly. You want from 2010 forward?
Sure. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Whatever you have easily.
Okay.
Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Dweck.
So I don't want to belittle the efforts of HPD, and certainly we appreciate them, but I'm hearing a lot of community concern about the harassment issues. What outreach are you doing to the actual...
Hey, Joe, start over. Can't hear you.
Okay. So I don't want to belittle the efforts that HPD has done, and again, we're hearing a lot of community concern about the displacement issues and the harassment issues. So what more can be done, and what better outreach can be done with the local community so that they feel part they understand better the work that HPD is doing and certainly mitigate their concerns about harassment and displacement.
Okay, so I didn't get to finish my testimony, but you can look in there. We have proactively done these block sweeps. When we go, we meet with the tenants in those buildings. We do hand out materials to them. We find out if there are harassment issues, and we do follow up on those. In addition to HPD, I believe HRA may speak about the Tenant Support Unit, who I know has also been beating the streets in East Harlem, sending people into the buildings. There are posted notices in every building required by law advising the tenants that they can get an ABCs of housing from HPD. And that document has a wealth of data on referral sources, places tenants can go, what the processes are for them to follow up on either maintenance issues or harassment issues. And certainly with all the money put by the administration into legal services, tenants should certainly reach out to those opportunities in their area.
Thank you.
Other questions?